you kind of want to fit in. And even though JIA is pretty invisible to other people, it's something that I began to feel self-conscious about because I didn't know if other people could see it. I knew it made me different.
Hi everyone, welcome back to this week's episode on Take a Pain Check. I'm excited to have Maya joining me today. Hi Maya, can you give me a brief introduction about yourself? Tell me a little bit about your education, your career, your hobbies, what you've been up to recently.
Hi, my name is Maya. I'm super excited to be here with you guys today. I just ended my third year of university at Dalhousie. I've been studying psychology and international development studies, and I also play university level lacrosse for Dalhousie. I'm hoping to go on to law school. I've been working hard at studying and taking my LSAT and just kind of refining my education.
Thanks so much for sharing. I feel like we always hear patients that are going into medicine or healthcare, but I think law also has a really cool aspect of like advocacy and like human rights and things like that. So we'll definitely talk more about your career aspirations. But you're on this podcast because you're diagnosed with a rheumatic disease. So what is your diagnosis and when were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis when I was 11 years old. My journey is a bit different than a lot of other people I've met. I wasn't diagnosed because I was having pain. My disease was very dormant at the time of my diagnosis, for which I'm very grateful. But I went to my orthodontist to get my braces on in the sixth grade. I was just going into junior high school. And when they were doing x-rays, they noticed that there was deterioration of my jaw joints and just something wasn't right. So my orthodontist referred me to a rheumatologist at the IWK, and I was diagnosed with JIA, or juvenile idiopathic arthritis. And from there, I started like a treatment plan from my diagnosis. And this time of my life, it was a bit difficult receiving a diagnosis like that, entering junior high school. I think a lot of young people can relate. You kind of want to fit in, and even though my JIA is pretty invisible to other people, it's something that I began to feel self-conscious about because I didn't know if other people could see it. I knew it made me different, and I've gladly built up a lot of confidence and resilience in dealing with it since then. But yeah, that's a bit about my diagnosis journey.
I think the invincible part is something that a lot of patients can relate to, whether it's like JIA or any other disease in general. It makes it super challenging to navigate and just kind of accept it because, yeah, people can't see it, so they constantly make comments, or you're right, you're like, okay, like, do I actually have this because it's not visible? So it's definitely a lot on like mental health as well. Um, I wanted to ask you because you were diagnosed at a young age and you also kind of live life without arthritis and now having life with arthritis. How did you adapt and what changes did you make to your life?
One of the ways that I knew I really had to adapt was finding peer supports. And I didn't exactly know how to do that because I got diagnosed at such a young age. There was always this stigma around rheumatic diseases. Like the only people in my family or around me that I knew who had them were much older. And so I struggled to kind of find people my own age who were going through what I was going through. And one of my main resources, I reached out to my rheumatology team, and they referred me to these programs through my city's children's hospital, one of them being a summer camp program. At first, I was a little hesitant because I was like, I'm kind of nervous, but I would give it a try. And I ended up going to summer camp for a few summers and really getting to connect with other kids who had the same rheumatic conditions that I did, were going through the same diagnosis and treatment journeys. And it felt like it didn't feel real, but it was like I was so appreciative of just being around other kids my age who were going through the same things that I was going through, and they became such a huge part of my support system. Um, and because they just understood things that a lot of my other friends didn't understand. And we obviously like connected on a level that was deeper than just like our diagnosis. Um, and yeah, the ways that I've kind of adapted since with like sports, I was very like adamant that I still wanted to continue doing the things that I love and continue prioritizing like my goals academically and with sports. And so just like having that open communication with my teachers and now my professors and my coaches, and again, like my friends and just the people close to me, it took a lot to build up my confidence to do that. But doing that was such a game changer for me, just having that open communication.
During school, did you have any sort of accommodations?
Yes, yeah, I did. One of the reasons I did reach out to my teachers was because I didn't want them to assume that I wasn't keeping up because of like, oh, I was lazy or like, oh, I just didn't want to do it. I have had accommodations through high school and university for note taking, because the mobility in my hands, sometimes I can't physically like keep up with taking notes in class. And it's not that I'm not paying attention, I just can't physically like keep up. So like working with my professors and having that open line of communication allowed me to like adapt and work with the different stages of my treatment and to keep up and still do the things that I love to do. But yeah, I just that open communication with teachers like allowed me, they actually referred me access to different resources like tutoring, note taking, testing accommodations, and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's great. Can you talk a little bit about like the symptoms that you had growing up with JIA and how that impacted your ability to do certain activities?
One of the symptoms that I really struggled with and I continue to kind of navigate is the chronic fatigue part of my diagnosis. Obviously, like I did have like the joint and muscle pain and like the side effects from medications and stuff was also something that I had a hard time dealing with, like nausea. And I had a hard time dealing with any symptoms that obviously like impacted what I love to do. And so I kind of adapted by having like I had like a kit almost that I would carry with me of just like things that would help depending on like what symptoms I was experiencing. But I think the chronic fatigue was one that like I really struggled with because I was such a busy and like social person that I didn't want, like that was a symptom that really like impacted just what I was doing and everything around me.
And then can you talk a little bit about your medication journey? Especially for me, I've been on like tons of different medications living with JIA, so I wonder what your medication journey was like and how did you make those informed decisions with your family when you had to switch medications, if any?
I feel very lucky. When I first started on medication at the beginning of my diagnosis, I was on a very like strict and very like strong dosage of methotrexate, which I think is a medication that I know a lot of my friends really like struggled on just because of the side effects and the symptoms. And going back to rheumatic conditions often being an invisible disease, sometimes I would even like second guess myself on whether like, oh, is your rheumatic like is this that bad that you need to be going through side effects of medications like this? And I oftentimes would like not want to take my medication, convincing myself almost that like, oh, like you're fine. Like you don't need to be on medications. And then like I would my doctor obviously like was always like, no, take it consistently, like you'll feel it if you don't. And over the years, I'm very lucky. I have been able to go on slowly like lesser and lesser dosages of methotrexate, but more often than not, I would end up going on multiple like anti-nausea medications and different like pain medications. As I've gotten older, I've been really resistant to taking pain medications. Like I'll power through a headache, I'll power through like body aches because I don't want to like take a pain medication or whatever. Um, but yeah, I think that's been a bit of my medication journey. My jaw was arguably the most impacted of my joints. I had extreme deterioration from like prolonged inflammation. Um, I I have had arthritis my whole life, even though I've only been diagnosed at 11. So over those years, there was just significant deterioration to my jaw joints, and it stunted the growth of my jaw bones as well. So when I was 16, I had extensive maxillofacial surgery. I had my jaw bones were cut in two different places and lengthened as well, and my jaw joints were reconstructed just to kind of fix the deterioration of my jaw joints as well as like the stunted growth. And that surgery was very difficult for me to go to. I think that was probably the most difficult part of my like treatment journey that I've been through. And it was a surgery that was like prepared for over years as well. So even the build up to that surgery was a bit like anxiety inducing, knowing that I'm gonna have to have this surgery. And yeah, just like working through the recovery of that as well and really trusting in the process of like this is going to be like painful in the moment, but it's going to improve your life so much to have this. So just being resilient through and trusting the process and trusting the doctors and my team that like this is what I need to do.
What was the recovery process like? And making the decision must have been like super hard as well, just being so young and doing it. But yeah, how did you recover through that?
I was the first time in my life that I had surgery as well, and I knew the recovery process was going to be difficult. My jaw was wired shut for 6 weeks, and so I could only ingest liquids. And that part was very hard for me. Just like being on liquids for 6 weeks, I think would be hard on anybody. Um, and I had like struggles, like I was having anxiety about like breathing, like, oh, am I going to be able to breathe okay because my jaw's wired shut? Like, what if I have like serious symptoms? And like I was worried about pain management as well. And just like I had to get a extensive plan together beforehand on how to deal with like simple things like eating and drinking, as well as like pain management and comfort. And like I was in the hospital recovering after the surgery for about a week in the ICU. And then there was things like during the recovery process that I encountered that weren't expected. I had been allergic to the anesthesia and had bad reactions to the pain medications they were giving me. And so it just everything kind of compounded. And it takes a lot out of your body having surgery. So like I was again exhausted and I just wanted to sleep. But like you had to be up every like 4 hours for pain management. It was exhausting, but it got easier and easier eventually. And once like they took elastics and wires off and I could eat and kind of feel somewhat normal, it was a lot easier getting back into it.
Did you have to miss a lot of school during this time, or was this like during the summer months or something?
I missed about 3 months of grade 11. I missed all of February, all of March, and all of April. Which was also very anxiety inducing for me because I very much focus on school. I was very much like worried about missing assignments and falling behind and how am I going to essentially get 5 months work done in 2 months, and I wasn't able to do schoolwork while I was recovering very much. I had to be fully focused on it. And so there was just a lot of different anxieties that were kind of compounding on each other that were again making that recovery a bit more difficult than just the physical.
And then telling your friends you have arthritis, what did that look like?
A lot of them didn't really understand the extent of what that meant. I have a couple friends who have like arthritis specifically in one joint because of like a sports injury, or I have a lot of friends whose like grandparents have it and they just kind of consider like the limited mobility part and they don't necessarily understand um, the underlying things that also come with a diagnosis like that. Obviously, I didn't necessarily have to explain my diagnosis or my treatment to my friends who have arthritis. I have some of my closest friends I've met at summer camp, and they all also have arthritis. So, um, yeah, just like approached it with my other friends more so explaining like my symptoms rather than trying to explain my rheumatic condition because they understood symptoms a lot easier and a lot better and how it affected me. I think just explaining to your friends how it affects you really gets the message across of like what you're going through easier than like the definition of a diagnosis or stuff like that.
I'm glad that you're able to also meet people that have rheumatic diseases because I feel like that definitely changes like your support system and having friends that don't have it versus having friends that do. It definitely there are big differences on what your friendship looks like. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more and dive in depth about those summer camps that you went to. Can you give me more information on like how did you decide that you wanted to go to these summer camps and what do these camps actually entail?
So the camps that I went to is sponsored by the Arthritis Society of Canada. It's called Camp Join Together at Brigadoon Village in Nova Scotia. And I first heard about it from my rheumatologist because at the time, my rheumatologist was really my only support of like someone who understood what someone my age would be going through with arthritis. So I was confiding in her at my appointments. And she referred me to this camp, and I decided to go the summer after I was diagnosed, just because I really did feel like I needed that support system. I have very supportive people in my life, but a lot of them don't necessarily understand there's like an intersectionality. I can go to one of my friends who doesn't have arthritis and be like, "Oh, how are you handling like sports?" And they'll speak to it as someone who doesn't have arthritis playing sports. Or I can go to my friends that are my age with arthritis and ask them, "Hey, how are you handling like your sports season this season?" And they'll give me a response, that intersectional response of like they are a person my age dealing with arthritis also playing sports. And there's just so many like minute details like that. And so when I went, I was put in a summer camp cabin with other girls my age who also had the same diagnosis as me. And we ended up connecting on a level that was so much more than our diagnosis. And it was a week of like normalcy. And normalcy in the sense of like everyone here is exactly like me, and there are accommodations that are so normalized that this week felt like a vacation on the lake with a bunch of my friends, and it didn't necessarily like it was a week that I could forget about my diagnosis and a week that I could forget about my treatment because I was like everybody else. And one of the slogans of the summer camp is giving extraordinary kids the chance to be ordinary. And I think that really summarizes like my experience perfectly. And after spending multiple summers there as a camper, I ended up going back as a junior camp counselor because I wanted to encourage that support system amongst younger kids and really give back to a community that provided me with so much support. And it was honestly one of the best decisions I've made during my like diagnosis and treatment.
That's really great to hear. I've never been to some of those summer camps, but I've heard really, really great things about them. So whenever I hear more people talk about them, I'm like, that's so great that you're able to go. So you were a camper, but do you also volunteer? Or is there like a difference?
Yeah, so I was a camper from 11 up until I turned 18. And then after you're 18, they have specific programs for kids who have gone to camp who want to work there because so many people are impacted and they want to like give back and work. I did a program like that. So it was so cool that like some of the girls that I went to this camp with, we now were all going back to volunteer and like give back to like essentially the place that brought us together. And I did that for 2 summers of volunteering, and I got to volunteer with other groups of kids who were experiencing other diagnoses as well. Yeah.
So I know that your parents created an organic homemade soap to help with your psoriasis. Can you talk a little bit about your journey with psoriasis and, what kind of led your parents to create this and how does this soap impact you?
For me, my psoriasis, it really flares up when I'm stressed. And so I ended up going away for my first year of university to St. FX, and I was experiencing like the stresses of first year. And my mom really like wanted to help in some way. And I find a lot of parents of kids with rheumatic conditions can feel like they can't do much to help. And so her way of helping was she ended up making a homemade soap that ended up helping like extremely well with my psoriasis while I was away at university and while I was stressed and having like breakouts and stuff. Um, so yeah, I've tried a lot of different treatments, but I don't know what it is about what she did or what she made, but it really saved me from like psoriasis symptoms my first year.
They made you the soap. Do they have any plans of kind of like helping other people with psoriasis in the future?
I have a lot of friends who also we were all struggling our first year like with stress. We just like our rheumatic condition flares up a bit more. And so she ended up giving it to some of my friends who were also using it. And during my first year of university, she actually ended up selling some to like a local business and a couple local businesses actually, one in PEI and one in Nova Scotia. And a portion of the proceeds from those sales actually went back to the Arthritis Society, just as kind of like honoring her inspiration for making the soap. But yeah, she has put it into some stores over like some seasons and stuff. But yeah.
That's amazing. So you've also traveled to many different places. Can you talk a little bit about some of the programs you were involved with that were, outside of the country and how you managed your condition being away from home?
Yeah. During my second year of university, I traveled to Athens, Greece with Global Brigades Canada. It's a nonprofit organization, and they have specific chapters at universities. And these chapters travel to different countries for a service week, essentially working and volunteering in communities. I traveled with the medical brigade from Dalhousie to Athens, Greece, to provide primary care and first response care to refugees and asylum seekers in that community. We worked in a clinic setting and in a refugee camp setting. That week that I was there, I worked specifically with children. And I knew while I was traveling, I was going to want to like give my best self and kind of be at like my peak physical state in order to serve these communities. And so I really consulted with my doctors and my rheumatology specialist beforehand, ensuring that like my medications kind of followed a timeline so that I wouldn't have to be so much worried about my medication cycle while I was there. So it took like a couple months to prepare, like being on like a dosage regimen where I wouldn't feel like crap the first couple days there or like nauseous from medication or have to travel with medication. So that timing was like really important. Yeah, just like symptomatic wise. And then while I was there, I knew I would be in a different climate. It's a lot hotter, a lot drier, even just like the jet lag and the fatigue. So just like I traveled with like a kit of just medications and different things that I could use if I ran into any like trouble with symptoms or anything.
That's really great that you were prepared for those things. Do you have any other initiatives and interests that you've kind of been involved in related to your rheumatic disease or even outside of the community that you would like to share?
Um, I've each year since I've left Brigadoon summer camps, I always have wanted to do things to give back, specifically to kids going to camp. Each year, the Arthritis Society holds a celebrity roast fundraising gala in Halifax, and each year I volunteer there, just kind of introducing myself to people in the room, and I telling basically my story about my experiences at camp. And one of the main initiatives and goals of those galas is to get donations to send a kid to camp. And so I found me going there and me working with other volunteers really was impactful to the people that I was speaking to. And I was able to kind of tell them about my experience at camp in order for them to like donate to send other kids to camp. That's probably been the main initiative that I've been involved in and continue to be involved in. And yeah, I would say so.
Amazing. You are also one of the 2025 recipients for the Take a Pain Check scholarship this year, specifically Learn Without Limits. So can you tell me a little bit about, how did you hear about this opportunity, and how do you plan on using the scholarship money that you gained?
I ended up learning about this opportunity from my rheumatology team. I truly feel like me and my rheumatologist and me and my specialist over the years have been a team. Whenever I've communicated my struggles or my needs with my team, they have responded fully in providing me with resources or things to look into or initiatives to like support. And one of those initiatives was the Take a Pain Check Foundation. And I plan to use this money to supplement my tuition, and I'm a first generation university student. I'm also a first generation high school graduate, and I'm also one of the first people in my family, I think the first person in my family to pursue law school. And so just using the money to supplement also tutoring. I've needed additional tutoring over my education because I have so many like medical appointments regularly, and just keeping up in class can sometimes be hard. Um, and so just having that kind of financial relief to be able to focus on my academics without um, kind of that extra worry is kind of what I've been planning to use the money for.
And do you have any advice for those who may want to apply for the following cycle for our scholarship?
I would, hmm, my advice would be to get definitely put your full foot forward and apply. I'm not sure, if this makes sense, but a lot of times when I find when you have an invisible, like a quote invisible illness, when opportunities like this come across your desk or come to you, you don't necessarily think like, oh, am I like, does that apply to me, like, am I actually limited, like, will this actually, like, am I deserving of this, essentially? Because a lot of times, scholarships like this, they are like targeted towards you, and they're targeted towards kids with rheumatic conditions because a lot of what they've gone through has been necessarily like invisible or like hard to acknowledge that, like from others. And so even for a minute, I was looking at the Take a Pain Check, like the foundation, the scholarships. I was like, does this really apply to me? Like, is this something that I would be like would be worth applying for? Is this something that like I'm deserving of? And one of the like pieces of advice I would give would be like, yes, you are deserving. Like you've lived with a rheumatic condition. Um, and you deserve like to learn without limits, and you deserve to like look into like this foundation and what they have to offer, because it like taking advantage of supports like is one of like the best things that I've ever done, and it's very easy to like be self-doubtful about whether or not like you actually need the supports, or whether or not this actually applies to you, or whether or not like you're sick enough or like whatever. And just having that confidence in like, yes, you are deserving, like, yes, like you could put your full self forward and apply. And like yeah, I would say so.
That's amazing. Thanks. And did you have any sort of, I mean, you are pretty well accomplished as well, and you've done so many things to get involved. So I definitely say, like, talking about those accomplishments and what you've done and really sharing your story is super important, which is something that you did really well. So congratulations.
Thank
Uh,
you.
and I wanted to ask you, what would you say to young girls who are struggling with confidence after being diagnosed with rheumatic disease?
It was something that I struggled a lot with too, especially like because of the timing that I was diagnosed. I feel if I was diagnosed when I was much older, I may have been a bit more confident, but even still, like, especially when you're diagnosed young and all you want to do is fit in, you kind of think like, oh, because I know I have a rheumatic condition, everyone can see it. And it's kind of a double-edged sword of it being an invisible kind of an invisible illness and it not, because your symptoms are very real, but because people don't necessarily see it, you can kind of convince yourself like, is it as bad as I think it is? Am I overreacting? Like, do I actually need these supports? Like, can I kind of deal with this on my own? You don't have to deal with it on your own. And having and like building the confidence of like just take that first leap of communicating your needs. And I found when I've first communicated my needs to my teachers, I was very nervous, but I had like a great support system behind me to fall back on. And once I first communicated my needs and they were met, it gave me the confidence to continue to advocate for myself, seeing that, oh, like this was validated, like I am struggling and there is help and there is supports. And just because you're having a, like for me, my rheumatic condition kind of went in waves. Like I would be doing really, really well, and then wouldn't be doing well at all, and then I'd be really doing really well, and then not at all. So in those high moments of like, oh, I'm doing so well, I would really doubt whether I needed my supports. But then in those moments where I wasn't doing so well, I was getting anxious that I was falling behind or that I couldn't keep up. And so just having those supports in place and having like the confidence that like it's there if you need it to be, like it was a complete game changer for me. I found that like the struggling with the anxieties of like not having what I needed at one point, like that completely outweighed my like fear of like not being confident to communicate my needs.
And what advice would you give to someone who is traveling with a rheumatic disease?
I would say preparation is key. Like you know your body better than anybody else. When you've been living with a rheumatic disease, I find like the people I've met as at least and myself, we are very like in tune with how our body feels, how our body reacts to certain things. And just being prepared in every way that you can, whether it's with medications, not nausea meds. With sports, I always carry athletic tape, just in case like I show up to practice and one of my joints feels weak, I can kind of tape my joints or like just learning little things. One of the game changers for me was there's these packs that you crack and they become ice packs. So I didn't necessarily need like wasn't worried about like refrigeration or anything like that. And just like being prepared as much as you can beforehand relieved a lot of like health anxiety for me and knowing that I was going to be able to like take care of myself and be okay.
Thank you so much, Maya, for joining me on today's episode. We talked about your personal journey living with JIA, specifically focusing on the childhood aspect. We talked about kind of your struggle with confidence, but then also how camp really created a safe space for you. We talked about, being a camper and then also a volunteer and the impact that you really want to make. We also talked about the jaw surgery that you had and kind of like coming to terms with it and your medication journey. Last but not least, we discussed your interests and your initiatives and what your parents have done to support you along this journey. So everyone, like, comment, subscribe, check out my social media channels, which I will link down below, and I'll see everyone in 2 weeks on Take a Pain Check. Thank you, Maya.
Thank you for having me.